So what time do we have? It's 8 o'clock. So let me tell you just a little bit about science education and then how this fits into it. Science education in Israel is something that was set up, in 1948, like everything else. And for the early years, I would say that the educational system in Israel was very much impacted by the German Aliyah. You probably know about the German Aliyah. Right? The Hebrew University was set up by the German Aliyah. It was the first university set up. And there was definitely a very elitist idea about education. Not everyone went to school. And if you went to school, it was hard. Over the years, I think they've been more influenced by the American tradition more than the German and maybe even the English tradition, which is education for everyone. But it took a while. So the idea of science education at the beginning was basically sort of a variation of getting ready to go to pilot school. You all know the expression "hatovim metayis." There's this expression here that the good soldiers will go to become pilots, and the idea is very much a hierarchical one, where actually the guy you want to fly your plane, or the person you want to defend you with the F-16, you want him to be the best. But what happened was education was like that too. And so in a thing like junior high school, what happened was junior high school became a place where they basically weeded out the good ones that went on for 5 units of math and physics, and that was what we call the pipeline, and everybody else who didn't get much attention. So what I'm doing in a few words is sort of sketching out what happened until, let's say, the 90s. In 1993 to 1998, 5 years, hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm not joking, hundreds of millions of dollars were put into improving science and technology education. This was one of the most, if not the most, significant educational reforms in the history of Israeli education. Not a big history, 59 years so far, but of all of the areas that really got a big push, it was science and technology. And the way they came up with this was called Tomorrow 98. Tomorrow 98, how they figured that out, I figured 98, they'd say, okay, that's going to be 50 years since the establishment of Israel. We want to be able to show something. We know that our society is going to need people who are not just the pilots or the scientists, but everybody's going to have to learn science. Because we want to have economy. We want to be able to have people who are voters who can make informed decisions. We want to be able to have a science literate public. So what they did was they took Chaim Harari, who, those of you who don't know, was the head of the Weizmann Institute, the president. Chaim Harari was Zvulun Hammer, who was the head of the Ministry of Education, who got this idea. Chaim Harari and a group of people sat for 2 years, came up with a blueprint of 42 different recommendations. Those recommendations were accepted after 2 years in whole, the whole thing. There was some prioritization that took place, and then the implementation of this plan went on for 5 years. What you see here, project-based learning, was one of the things to come out of that, because there was money around, there was interest, there was a lot of creativity going on, and it was also change from what I described earlier of everyone who is good goes to science, those who aren't, we don't teach them science, to a new idea, which was science for all. Today, the situation has changed from what I described earlier. Now we have, in middle school, we have programs for all levels, and we actually integrate science and technology for everyone. We still have in the high schools what you might call the pipeline of the people who are going to take the 5 units. I don't know if you know what that means. 5 units is like the highest, not like AP. The 5 units of biology, physics, math, chemistry, computer sciences, earth sciences. But everybody else is still obligated to learn science. That may not sound strange for people in the States, who do that all the time, but for Israel it was a big thing. So just describing what happens in science education, there are schools apparently all over, as you know. Who creates a curriculum? The curriculum is divided up in to different areas: biology, physics, math, all those I mentioned, from elementary, then middle, and high school. And what's different about what goes on in Israel as opposed to in the States is that each university, there's 7 major universities in Israel, each university has a part of one of those puzzles, or one of those dots. So when I work at the Weizmann Institute, I work in the group that does middle school science. There's another group at the Weizmann Institute that does high school physics. In the Technion, they do middle school technology. And in Tel Aviv, they do elementary science. So it's all divided up. Another thing that you should know, what I feel very proud about, I was involved with it and I'm very much involved with it still, there's a very, very well-developed informal science education program in Israel. Every university has after-school clubs, has summer camps, has a variety of projects for the science-oriented or the science-interested. So it's really quite amazing. One of the jobs I've had over the last few years was to be a coordinator of all that. So I was traveling to all the different universities in Israel and then sort of helping them get their programs going. It's quite an amazing situation because you've got not just science that you have to do, but you have science that you like to do. And those programs are filled. At the Weizmann Institute today, for example, you would go to, I think it's like the 40th Bessie F. Lawrence Summer Science Institute, where something like 55 or 60 kids from all over the world get together for a whole month. And these are people who won the Intel Science Search project, which would be Westinghouse, or the German equivalent, and so forth. They get together and they have these programs. During the year, it's open to anybody. So that's kind of neat. So having said all that about what science education is, and showing you that there is a real emphasis of Israeli society on the importance of science, I thought that maybe we'd stop a bit and take questions, and then maybe go into the second half of the evening, which would be sort of getting more into the tachlis, the practical aspects of project-based learning, and see if we can use that to develop some of the things that you're doing. So first of all, I'll stop for questions. Any questions?